Hi everyone and welcome back to Stephan NVK podcast brought to you by Bold. For American listeners, you can buy and sell Bitcoin over at getbold.io. Now, rejoining me on the show today is my friend NVK. Many of you know him as the founder and CEO of Coldcard, the creators of the Coldcard and various other products relating to Bitcoin security and Bitcoin accessories, some of them. NVK, welcome back to the show.
Hey man, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, great to chat with you. And we're going to chat today. Let's the state of self-custody. What's the latest on this? Of course, I know there's some updates on Coldcard that we'll get to, and maybe later we'll get onto some of the op return drama because that's going to be topical for listeners. So look, let's just start with state of self-custody. So as we record, it's May 2025. Where are we at in self-custody today?
I think it's great. People are really taking on the challenge of learning about Bitcoin, getting hardware wallets, setting it up and getting that going. I think we're slowly sort of getting over the hump of some of the old FUD about grandmothers can't self custody Bitcoin or this or that, a bunch of idiocies around that. I think people also tested and tried different things that have a lot more trade-offs, and I think enough people, especially people that have a significant amount of Bitcoin, relative to their savings, right? They're realizing that the importance of self custody, the importance of of sovereignty, the importance of checking their own node, the importance of having seeds, all that good stuff. And I don't think it has ever been this easy. It's if you ever use the Coldcard, with Sparrow, you have your coins there, you scan the screen, you press sign, and then you tap your phone, and then the coins go out. It really it is easier than online banking thus far, without really barely any trade-offs in terms of privacy or any other sort of bad trade-off that we could have in Bitcoin self-custody.
Yeah, gotcha. And so I guess as an example, in that flow you're talking about there, you can you can get you can scan it in with the the reader on the Coldcard queue as an example, and then what you're saying is you can tap it to your phone to actually do the send, right? To broadcast the transaction, to be clear. Yeah.
Exactly, right. So there's no micro SD cards involved. There is no USB involved. There's no Bluetooth involved. There's none of this sort of very sort of bad, complex protocols involved, which is very important in regards to your air gap security. So I think we're at a good place. PushTX is open source standard. People can use it if they want to integrate it in their systems. Barbecue QR open standard also, and I think that's fairly easy now to do.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, this is something I've, over the years, right, because obviously I've been teaching people about self-custody as well for years, and when I was teaching them Coldcard, it used to be oh, you might need one of these little guys that can do the SD card to your computer. You might need a USB or micro USB cable, or you might need all these different things, and then if you want to make it air gapped, you might need to do it in that a certain way. Whereas nowadays it's more okay, get a Coldcard queue, get 3 AAA batteries, and then everything can either be done by scanning and send it and reading it back that way, or you can do the NFC tap if you want. So it really has evolved a lot now, and I think tools like Sparrow. Sparrow's my favorite, but of course there are others like Nunchuck, and I know Keeper as well.
Yeah, there's also a Cove coming out, which is really cool. Yeah. Super simple to use wallet. It's going to come out of beta very soon. Everybody can use it. It's open source. And that also works in the same principles. So, if you're a true noob and you don't want any of the other features and things, you can just use something like that. I think that's super cool.
Yeah. And so I guess one thing that we have seen, and this is a trend I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, is that every now and again, there's a new wallet that comes out, and it's super simple, and it's super slick. But there are certain kind of bundled or hidden trade-offs made in the background, right? And in that background, it might be, let's say, maybe less verifiable, or less reproducible, or maybe less portable in the setup, that you can't just like take the seed out of that and put it somewhere else. And so I think that's one challenge where, and there are people trying to make it easy for new people, but it ends up making some of those trade-offs, or trade-offs are being made in the background. I'm curious, what have you seen on that?
Yeah, I think it's super important for people to try to come up with new solutions, right? And we have to test them in the market and see what works. But I think it's also super important to be very honest about the trade-offs, right? And that's often not something you see, right? Because everybody wants to sell their product. So I think that there is a few things that are non-negotiable when you're talking about sort of like long-term hodl, right? I think these trade-offs are amazing. Like anything that is like, a few inches away from no custody is better, right? Like you don't want people to be on Coinbase, right? You want people to take the coins into self-custody, right? But there are solutions that are sort of like in between, right? They require more trust, but they are easier to use, and that's great. However, you don't want your coins to be in a place that doesn't use a seed, doesn't use a hardware wallet that has a screen, doesn't have PSBT, so that is fully portable between other setups. You need to use systems that are fully vendor agnostic, right? That respects sort of like the mentality of Bitcoin, where none of the vendors matter. Your coins are your coins, and you can easily replace anybody in any part of the chain without any pain, ideally, right? So I think I put some of that stuff on bitcoinsecurity.org. I think it's super important, especially as we see more people coming as the price starts to go up, to that eternal September battle of like trying to educate the people who are coming in of like, these are the trade-offs. Don't use your gap computers. Use seeds. Check transactions on screen. Don't connect devices to the USB. All the basic stuff I think is important to always sort of like bring back again and sort of try to get people to understand that, because they're not obvious things, right? Everybody offers look at my super easy, super secure solution, right? But like, like a lot of trade-offs are sort of like understated or overlooked, often because just the user is just knowledgeable enough.
Yeah. And then I think the other challenge for people is, it's one thing to just get started with, okay, write down 12 words, generate a Bitcoin address and hodl on that. But I think the next step for a lot of people is more like dealing with things like inheritance and these kinds of aspects of it. And maybe that's where there's a bit of, what's the word? Like, it's a common concern for, let's say, high net worth Bitcoiners. Maybe they're a bit more concerned about, hey, how am I going to make sure I can pass these coins to my heirs when I die?
Yeah, it's not an easy problem. It really isn't. And people do have different problems because there are different jurisdictions and all kinds of other issues. And we don't have perfect or amazing answers yet, right? Like there's really good solutions. Like, there's collaborative multi-sig like Nunchuck or Casa or Unchain. There's BitKey with some trade-offs. There is what else? I mean, then there is like the fully sort of like made multi-sigs, with like keys geographically separated in a way that the family gets it. Like, I don't think we're quite there yet, but because it's also very early, right? I mean, it's only been 16 years of Bitcoin. So I think people need to just sort of like accept that we don't have perfect yet. Accept that we're going to be changing things along the way, but things are significantly progressing, right? Like, for example, with Miniscript, degrading multi-sigs on something like Anchor Watch or Liana, they have trade-offs as well. It's not quite there, but it is significantly getting better. I think Trident is going to be a huge improvement on this. That's a wallet by Anchor Watch that's coming out, and then there is more things being worked on, and it's nonstop progress, but it does take time.
Yeah, and I think the Miniscript stuff is interesting. I think it it will become more and more popular over time, and more hardware wallets will support it. But I guess maybe what's needed is, in the same way that multisig, when it was a bit newer, people were playing around with all kinds of different setups, and then over time, people sort of converged to 2 of 3 and 3 of 5. And so maybe in a similar sense, Miniscript will have certain templates that become very popular. Like, this is a common template for inheritance, so just use the standard template there.
I mean, and realistically speaking, for most people, even just passphrase and single sig on a cold card is fine. Like, like we can talk about state actor threats, we can talk about, all kinds of like, evil spouse, whatever it is, right? But like, realistically speaking, for most people, for the amount of coin that they have versus their other savings, right? Like, being able to pass on like a seed plate, right? Like a metal plate, it's not different than them passing on their like, nice watches or whatever it is to their family, right? Like, that is better than not doing it. Or it is better than making trade-offs with systems and solutions that give up a lot of privacy, that give up a lot of other trade-offs, right? So, people really need to sort of like reflect on like, if this thing was worth 10 times more than it is today, right? I love that the rule of thumb. If Bitcoin is worth more than 10 times today, the amount that I have in the setup that I have, does it suffice? Is it realistically okay for me to have as it is? Why do I learn more? Why do I try to improve it?
Yeah. And I guess the other question for a lot of people will just be the impetus to self-custody, right? Because, as I'm sure you're well aware, there's a lot of new people coming in over this, and maybe over the next year, who knows. A lot of those people might be coming into custodial or derivative things, right? Like maybe it's ETFs, maybe it's, Bitcoin treasury companies, this kind of thing. What do you find is the impetus that drives them to sort of start doing self-custody? Is it, the number has gone up a bit and now it's time for me to actually get some self-custody Bitcoin? What have you seen?
It's sorry, Liver, I got a little distracted there. We might have to,
so
to
in
cut
terms
that
of
one.
what is
Re-add
it
it.
that makes people start the journey of self-custody instead of just doing custodial stuff?
Yeah, so like we do see now that the majority of retail comes first to derivatives of Bitcoin, right? So that be MSTR or ETFs or whatever, right? And like those products unfortunately are not convertible to BTC. It's not like Coinbase where you bought Bitcoin at risk and then all you had to do was just withdraw, right? You can't withdraw your coins from MSTR. I don't see anything wrong with people going with those products, as if that's all they're gonna have, well, then it's better than nothing. However, those products were really designed for institutions and larger pockets that don't have a choice, like they're not allowed or able to self-custody real coin. So, like I think it's part of our responsibility is like, like Bitcoiners, it's like, hey, let's try to educate people and get them to not get wrecked and sort of like self-custody their own Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin is about two upsides, right? Like you have the non-debasement number go up upside, right? And then you have the sovereign upside, right? And the sovereign upside cannot be understated. I mean, being able to withdraw and transact without permission is a huge fucking deal. It's what gives Bitcoin its number go up. So, I don't see the benefit of, like your average person buying a little bit of ETF or a little bit of MicroStrategy. Like realistically speaking, like they're not gonna have enough that's gonna matter too much. So might as well buy real coin and have it in the safe the same way they have a little bit of gold, that they have a little bit of something else in their own safes.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about the new features on Coldcard. I know there's two big ones. There's this co-signing and the key teleport. So do you want to just explain the new co-signing feature? What is co-signing on the new Coldcard?
So part of the motivation on this was like, can we have Coldcard act as a collaborative multi-sig signer, right? Like, can we give Coldcard spending policy? Right, so like velocity, so like how many, like can I can't spend more than 1 BTC per day or something like that, right? Like, or it needs another authentication of sorts, right? So what we did was we essentially baked in that into the device. So now you can have a cold card that has two keys. One is your normal key, and the other key is the key behind the policy that you cannot change unless you give its whole seed again. So you prove that you have the seed with you. So what does that mean? It means that, like, say for example, you can set up a company executive with some coin that he can spend in a certain policy while traveling. It means that you can travel with coin now in a way that there is no amount of like trying to force you that will make that policy go away, right? And it's provable too, which is great. This is great for you to maybe give it to a spouse or maybe between two coworkers, like, because the two coworkers can both have a cold card that has, like, so one has their key and this policy key, and then yours can have their key, like your key and the policy key as well. So just imagine you now have collaborative multi-sig in your hands. Like, that's a good way of looking at it. For some people, maybe that's enough for their whole savings, right? Like, I mean, is it better than having a completely separate devices? Like, absolutely not, right? Like, I mean, having things properly done in the correct, like, super cypherpunk way, great, do that, right? If you can. But if this is the max that you can do, then, I mean, this is a massive improvement, right? And that's sort of like, we've started sort of like trying to shift internally. It's like, what else can we do with our secure environment, which is the cold card, that doesn't require computer services or servers, right? And we're trying to move in that direction with this feature, and it's super useful. I mean, like, people have been sort of like contacting us and now even asking us to see if we can do this for a single sig too. So we're looking into, like, if that's possible in a way that we're comfortable with. But having the policies on the device itself are a big deal.
Yeah, so just to refresh then, or to go back, as I understand, you have different things you can restrict. So one is magnitude, as in the amount. You can say, I don't want this device or the spending policy to allow a signature spending more than 100,000 sats, as an example. And then you have address whitelisting. So I guess what you're saying there is only send to these addresses. And then you have velocity, how many transactions per day. And then you've got a 2FA as well. So those are the main, as I understand, the spending policies that you can implement on the co-signing feature. Okay. And then can you talk us through, I guess, I mean, you were talking about this a little bit earlier, but who are the typical users? Are you thinking this is like a business use case or individual use case or maybe a family use case? What would it
So
look like?
it really is, like, it's a very broad sort of user base for this, right? But like, this started sort of like as a travel wallet, right? Like, in terms of like mentalities, like, can I have a device that when I'm away from from one of the keys, I'm still able to sign with that key, but I am protected by a policy,
Right. But only
right?
smaller amounts, let's say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So travel, internal operations of companies. You can use it for personal sort of like hodl. You can use it for inheritance. You can use it for I mean, anything really, right? Like, I mean, having a policy that helps you not accidentally spend more than you should, or under duress spend more than you should, is a huge deal, right? This works for everyone the same way that trick pins work for everyone in different ways, right? I really think that, like, people should essentially, like, look at their current setup, right, and see if like that could be improved with this. Another cool thing too is if they already have a multi-sig setup, they can still leverage this because they can load that second key or the third key into the same device. So, like, they don't have to move their coins if they already are using multi-sig to leverage this. They can just load their own key.
I see, yeah. Okay, so yeah, it's a bit of an open one then, and I guess people have to be imaginative or at least understand the use case of, like, why would they do this, and generally that might be some kind of, make it so that it can only spend a smaller amount and not the whole amount that's secured by that wallet, as an example, by that hardware device.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, and then, so that's the co-signing aspect of it. Oh, could you also explain the 2FA part of that? Like, how does the 2FA work on this co-signing
Yeah,
feature?
so because Coldcard doesn't have a clock and stuff, like essentially you have to scan. It's called Web 2FA. You go to a website, with your 2FA, and then you scan this QR code, and then the Coldcard will liberate. Sort of like you'll be part of the transaction chain of authorization, right? So essentially, like you use Authenticator, right? And just like for you to withdraw funds from your exchange, you need to use the Google Authenticator. You do the same. You just use 2FA for that policy to be met.
Back to the show in a moment. This show brought to you by CoinKite.com, the creators of the best Bitcoin hardware security devices such as the Coldcard Mark IV and the new Coldcard Q. Now, we use Bitcoin hardware security devices to keep our keys offline, our private keys offline. Now, the way these work is you can do that setup, write down your 12 or 24 words on the seed word cards, and keep that secure. Now, you can use this device to interact with the Bitcoin network using software such as Sparrow Wallet, Electrum, or Vector Desktop, or Nunchuck as a few examples. Now, you have a range of security features that you can use with these devices, such as passphrases, you can use seed XOR, or my favorite is multi-signature. Now, if you're starting in a basic way, just start with the device and the USB-C cable, plug it directly to the computer and use it that way, and then later improve your setup. But I believe these devices are great at helping secure your coins, especially as you start to migrate up into multi-signature security. But don't be disheartened or don't be scared away. They are accessible, and I think you actually do learn about Bitcoin in the process. So to get yours, go to coinkite.com, use code Livera to get a discount on your Coldcard. This episode brought to you by Galloy. They are building banking software for the Bitcoin age. So if you are with a bank, a fintech, or a startup looking to offer some kind of Bitcoin product, whether that is a Bitcoin collateralized loan, deposit accounts, or payments, Galloy can help you. Their latest product is called Lana. It is a loans management platform, and you can use this to come to market quickly and offer a loans or Bitcoin collateralized lending product for your customers. Now, Galloy have a lot of experience in the space. They started with Blink Wallet in 2020, and they've since grown this to become a community favorite over time. And so they have a lot of experience making things work in a secure, reliable, and scalable way. So if you need assistance coming to market quickly with a Bitcoin banking product, such as lending or deposits or payments, talk to the team at Galloy. You can email them. The email is biz@galloy.io, or go to the website galloy.io. And now, back to the show. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, got it. So that's the cosigner. Now, the other big feature I noticed is the key teleport. So what is key teleport?
So key teleport was born out of the reality that, again, you cannot trust your computer, you cannot trust your phone for secrets in general, right? And a lot of people are no longer in the same location, right? Like they're traveling, they're sovereign individuals, like people are exiting countries, coworkers are remote, people are just remote all the time, right? And like, how do you get two people to exchange secrets securely and privately, right? With a secure environment. So we created this feature called Key Teleport. And it's extremely easy to use. That was part of the requirements that we created for ourselves. So you can send somebody on a video call a private key without being concerned about the video call. That's pretty powerful, right? So, for example, let's say you're helping your grandma get set up with a Coldcard on the other side, right? The proverbial grandmother that doesn't exist. You can just you can ship her a Coldcard, like Virgin, right? She just presses the key teleport part, and then you can send to her a private key from your BIP85 that you set up, or a brand new Coldcard. You can send her the whole backup, so the whole Coldcard is set up. It could even be a Coldcard that has co-signing, a co-signing setup on it too. So you can send the whole setup pre-made for her. So that means you can do this for coworkers, for example, right? So if you have an executive who's abroad, he needs to do some transactions for the company, whatever, you can pre-set up the Coldcard, send it to him over a video call or NFC with a web page that we created called keyteleport.com. You can send other secrets. So, for example, you have to send somebody some SSH keys, for them to get into the server because the server is down. The guy didn't take his computer that he has access to stuff. You can send that. You can send secure messages. You can send, secret bank accounts that are on your secure notes. Anything really that Coldcard supports in terms of data is now transmissible by key teleport.
Yeah, and then can you explain the encryption used here to make sure that it gets to the other side with nobody else interfering?
Yeah, so we're using essentially like a Hall Diffie-Hellman tunnel. So you just exchange, like the receiver essentially shares his public key, which is ephemeral. So it's not related to your private key for Bitcoin at all, right? So he just shows you a QR code and gives you a PIN. That PIN just helps with the privacy to happen. And then you now have his public key, and you can just like encrypt the data with his public key to send it to him. It's the same way, very similar way to how Coldcard does its secure clone or secure migrate.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so then the actual method of transmitting, is it using QR code there, or what's the...
Yeah, so you can use the QR code or you can use an FC. And so, for example, let's say, like your, potato camera on the computer or the video call is too bad, you can't use QRs over the video call. Then what you can do is you just tap, and that gives you a link. And then you give that link to the other party on say, on text chat. Say, for example, you don't have access to video chat. It's only text chat. You can send this special link to them, and then the special link starts the dance, and then you keep on going from there.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. And so then, yeah, that allows maybe remote assistance. That might be also interesting for people. Of course, always got to be wary. That can also open up like remote scamming vectors, but also at the same time, remote.
But they also have
vectors.
the seed, right?
Yeah.
So the remote scamming could just happen by please give me your seed.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Exactly. So, this feature is inside advanced, so like you do prevent some of that. There is a little bit of gatekeeping there. Another very cool thing is there's a few phone app wallets that are working on integrating this too. So, say for example, you want to set up grandma, set up your dad, set up coworker or whatever with a BIP85 or some other seed from your seed vault. You should be able to beam that key teleport seed to their phone wallet as well. So maybe you did the backup for them while they're abroad, and you can help them get all sorted. Because a lot of times, like most of the time, the impedance of you setting up your own seed is the fact that you may not be able to do a backup. Right? Like you don't have a metal plate, you don't trust the environment, whatever reasons, or like you don't want to get into the whole explaining to grandma how to do the metal backup. You're already going to handle the seed for her anyways, right? So let's make this happen remotely as well, because people no longer live close to each other.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting point that now people are living further apart, and they don't necessarily all live near each other, the people that they want to help and support. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there. On the Miniscript side of things, as I understand, that's still on the Edge firmware of Coldcard. Do you want to explain a bit, where are things at with Miniscript on the Coldcard queue?
Yeah, so like Coldcard queue is essentially like following the Edge. It's the Edge release, but also following the Edge limits of like what Miniscript is at in terms of development, and also what is possible with hardware, right? Miniscript is a very large design space, right? Especially when you add TypeScript and all the other stuff. So it's early. There's a lot going on. We're still sort of even validating the safe scripts out there, right? So we did remove the big def warning from Edge firmware. So if you want to use Miniscript, as long as Coldcard is not the sort of like a single critical point of failure, we're comfortable with people starting to use Miniscript with Coldcard for serious money, and people are. under those conditions, right? So we're trying to be, as usual, extremely conservative with this kind of stuff because, it's complex technology, and that means there's going to be a lot of edge cases, a lot of bugs to be found, and if it's followed without single points of failure, it should be good.
Yeah, and I think it will enable different uses. I know Rob Hamilton and the Anchor Watch guys are doing this kind of Miniscript enabled insurance case. There are others, as you mentioned, the Liana guys are using it to enable things like kind of very deep backup recovery, as an example, or these different conditions. I think the Keeper guys are also doing something there on Miniscript as well. So those are the main ones I know of who are actually really using Miniscript in practice on these devices. Anything you want to add there on the Miniscript side?
No, I think that's it. Like, I think it's progressing. It's going to take time. Like, there's a lot of things that are done with Miniscript that tries to get around the fact that we don't have covenants in Bitcoin. But you can't change Bitcoin. You cannot depend on Bitcoin being changed. So like we have to keep on moving. There's been some interesting sort of like ideas that people gave us, because now with the Coldcard cosign feature, once it moves to the edge branch so that you can use Miniscript of it, it starts to get interesting. You can mix that with other sort of solutions and start creating some kinds of vaulting. Rindell had some ideas around that. It's all promising. It's just that, like, I think there's two conversations in Bitcoin that sometimes get mixed together. But, there is the true and tried stuff that just fucking works, right? Like, and the majority of people are still using single sig passphrase, right? Because it just fucking works. And then, like, multi-sig got a lot better. So P2SH kind of multi-sig got a lot better. And it's very production ready, and everybody's using. There's billions of dollars on it. And then there's the Miniscript stuff that's new. There's a couple scripts that are like sort of like good and well tried, and people are starting to put real money on it, but it's early. And then there is, like, all the crazy, amazing
Like
stuff that we
Frost
could
stuff.
create.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's a lot of stuff being worked on that still needs, like, it takes years sometimes to get some of the stuff going, because again, like, nobody wants to lose money, right? Nobody wants a Miniscript boating accident.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and even more out there, maybe some of the Frost stuff. I know that requires maybe more specialized hardware. I know there's the Frost Snap guys who are doing some work on that kind of thing, but still seems a bit early. I'm curious if you have any other kind of thoughts on that, like the Frost stuff. I presume it's interesting to you, but just early stage, right?
So Frost is super interesting. I think there is a huge potential there to diminish the need for hardware wallets, especially for like non-massive piles. I think there's potential to even improve hardware wallets on how they're done and stuff, but it's early. We still need better ways of handling the interactivity of Frost. It has not been productized yet, and that's very telling. There's a lot of Frost being used on Nostr as well, starting to sort of get going on that as well, so you can have your identity more protected. But again, it's like very complicated cryptography. It's new stuff. It just takes time.
Yeah. In terms of wallets and things, you mentioned Cove Wallet as well. So shout out to our friend Praveen who's making Cove Wallet. Do you want to touch on any of the actual wallet softwares and what you're seeing there? What's, I guess, interesting to you?
Yeah. So Cove is super cool, super bullish on that. I think we were missing a ultra simple to use phone wallet that also works with hardware wallets with open standards. It's not trying to do all kinds of crazy shit. It's not trying to do Lightning. It's just basic. So like, when I have to, like, onboard new users, it's just like, here, use this. They can start with just a seed that they backed up on paper and then grow into a hardware wallet, all without having to change apps, right? So it's very cool. It's on test flight. It's gonna be coming out of beta very soon. I highly recommend people go to, I think it's covewallet.com, join the testing groups, give feedback. It's fully open source. and uses BDK. It's working with the BDK guys to sort of improve BDK as well, because it's a good testing ground for BDK. And yeah, all around great project. Is OpenSats funded, and I think it's going to grow and it's going to be a big deal.
Gotcha. Just for listeners, it's covebitcoinwallet.com. That's the
That's
address.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then Sparrow, Craig keeps on pushing. Sparrow's great. It's a workhorse. It has a lot of features. It is a bit more sort of like bloated in terms of UI, but because it has all the advanced features, right? But like if you're moving serious money, you need desktop wallets. You're not gonna do that on your phone. You need to be able to inspect things further, and you need to be able to have privacy features and things. So Sparrow's doing great. Electrum, it's a mixed bag. It is sort of like, it's the second wallet that ever existed in Bitcoin after Core. The code base is like very complicated to review because it's older and it has a bunch of stuff added over time. They just added user space plugins, so if you don't know what that means, don't do it. Lots of room to be on there. But like Electrum is there, is being maintained. It is very helpful sometimes when you need to get out of a snag with older wallets. There is Nunchuck. Those guys are also pushing through, creating new things. There's the collaborative multisig is there, works great. It works great to tap signer and sats cards. Same with Keeper. Keeper is a bit newer. It's improving. What else? And what I love about like all of these is that like they all use seeds, right? Like it's seed based, PSBT based. Everything is interchangeable. Everything is vendor agnostic. It's a great sort of place to be in, especially as things change, right? Because honestly, like it's a high likelihood that none of the companies that are here now are here in 20 years from now, right? So being able to move things without the vendor being around easily, without needing special scripts and things, it's a huge fucking deal for the future, right? So what other projects right now are doing great? Like, so Liana has an interesting proposition with how they do their degrading multisig, but you do have to rotate UTXOs every time you span. What else? There's Crux. If you're looking for a DIY hardware wallet to sort of like play around and make sure you always use DIY hardware wallets in multisig, because those platforms are less secure, like harden themselves. I'm pretty happy with that project too. Also, OpenSats funded, fully open source. There's a lot going on. I mean, like I think because like single sig plus phrase is so powerful, so good, works for most people. Like people sort of like stop looking, rightly so, right? But things are being developed and new ideas are coming in, and I think we are going towards a better place.
Yeah, interesting. And I think some of this Miniscript stuff and the degrading multisig and these kinds of things, for now, as I understand, the time out is like a little bit over a year, maybe a year and a half or a year and 4 months or something like that. And because of that, it requires like kind of a refresh every, like, let's say once a year, something like that. And then maybe in the future, hypothetically, if people are okay with like a CTV or something like that, then maybe that would enable kind of more, or Vault would enable, I guess, more advanced forms of that. But for now, sort of
Yeah, I mean, listen, if we get
possible.
covenants and we get something like Upvault, like it's going to be 1,000 times improvement in self custody. Like, it would be huge. Like, you're no longer in a position where you have to like, put fucking seeds in different like countries and stuff to that extent. Like, you can be in a much better place, and like we can have much more complex policies and inheritance out in the future. You can do a lot of like setup that is chain dependent, not vendor dependent. I think it's in everybody's interest to get something like Upvault on. It's a shame that Covenant's discussion really sort of like goes down to like payments and feeding chickens online, where like I think most people who are extremely conservative and more on the store of value sort of like preference stack, I think they'll greatly they'd become Upvault cheerleaders if they spent some time looking into it. But unfortunately, like the sales comes with like I want to do degen shit on Bitcoin. If you have time, go look at Upvault proposal. I think it's worth your time in your lobby.
Interesting. Yeah, fair point. I agree. And then also I think I just want to, I guess, highlight something that you were talking about with seeds, right? It's important because maybe old hands will kind of know this stuff, but seeds are really cool because, as an example, you could take like that same 12 words and recreate it or into another wallet. And so that gives you some help. Like, let's say there's a device failure for whatever reason, or is a fire or whatever. And it works even in the case of a multi-sig. So let's say this was like 1 in a 2 of 3 or 1 in a 3 of 5, but this device, broke or was in a fire or whatever. I could get another one, take the same 12 or 24 words, put it into that device, and it would still sign as the same key, and it would still be a part of that.
Without the vendor, and that's the key. Without the vendor, you don't need to ask permission or contact anyone in order to do that. Like, there is no server service or anybody else like between you and your coins being recovered. That's a superpower. It comes with more responsibility, but that is a superpower.
Yeah, so this kind of seeds as a superpower is an important point for people to understand. Now, I guess I agree with you on that point, but I think the counter argument that you might hear from people is this kind of, everyday people should not be handling key material, right? Which I think comes off as a little bit more of a sort of an ivory tower technocrat sort of idea.
But it's bullshit, right? Because, like, listen, if you cannot handle it, then they shouldn't even be buying Bitcoin in the first place. Like, if you're not willing to take responsibility, go buy some MicroStrategy. You're going to probably get better returns. Like, seriously, like, realistically speaking, I mean, I'm not advertising go buy MSTR in that sense because good knows, right? Like, I mean, there is management risk on everything, right? But realistically speaking, you buying some like if you're gonna outsource the sovereignty anyways, then maybe just having that stuff in your broker account, like maybe makes more sense. Like maybe they even give you more returns, right? So I think that, like, listen, if you're gonna own BTC and you need an in-between solution, absolutely find things that may have like trade-offs, and it's a lot better than keeping coins on an exchange or having MSTR. But know that you must learn and continue to improve your self-custody and get to a point where you're sovereign. Otherwise, you're going to end up fucked.
The lead sponsor of this show is Bold, the best place to buy, sell, and save Bitcoin. For listeners in the US, Bold lets you secure your financial future with complete peace of mind by integrating a low-fee, Bitcoin-only brokerage with next-gen multi-sig vaults. With Bold, you can smash buy Bitcoin or set a DCA plan for only 0.99% fees and seamlessly deposit the Bitcoin direct to your Bold vault. The Bold Vault is a 2 or 3 collaborative multi-sig where you hold 2 keys and Bold holds 1 as a redundant backup, protecting against loss or theft. You can use Trezor, Ledger, or Coldcard hardware wallets to spin up a Bold Vault in just a few minutes, and the Bold Vault is the only collaborative custody vault available with 0 monthly fees. They're also offering 0 fees on your first $10,000 of Bitcoin buys and $25 of free Bitcoin when you buy $100 of Bitcoin or more. Try Bold today and upgrade your stacking experience over at getbold.io. And now, back to the show. Yeah, it's important. It's an important reminder for a lot of people, not your keys, not your coins, as we always say in this space. So it's important for people to remember that. So yeah, I guess that's kind of, the self-custody aspect of it and the state of custody, as well as some of the Coldcard updates. I also wanted to chat to you, and I'm sure listeners will be interested to get your take because it's quite topical now. It seems to be flaring up, a big discussion now. All this op return drama and stuff like that. I'm curious, do you have a a take on that? Do you have a position? What are you thinking about this op return issue?
I have many takes that'll probably get misrepresented, like everything in Bitcoin. But I think there's a few things going on. Like, first is, there's a new batch of like GitHub maintainers. It's a thankless job. It's hard. It's an impossible position. You can't please anyone. But I think the current crop just does not have the perspective of like time, of like what Bitcoin was like, how we got here. They don't have the patience with what they perceive people to be maybe less academic or less polite. They don't understand that that's where Bitcoin came from. It was dark money. And a lot of the people who've been in the space forever are more interested in the bluntness than the politeness.
Just to be clear here, are you referring there more to like the GitHub comments? Because there were some very, long-time contributors who are, putting their comments on the mailing list comments. People like, Peter Villa and Luke Dasher and others, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I'm just talking first about the GitHub problem, right? Like, GitHub is... it is a centralized tool. It is, so much so that Microsoft bought them. It's a very bad tool for rough consensus decentralized protocols. Okay, because a centralized tool that has very poor community management tools, it indexes for, it pushes people to be dictators. Right? Because, there's only so much time in their day to it, they don't want to fucking deal with it. Right? So there is that problem. Like, Bitcoin should move out of GitHub and go to something like Nostr, like at least for the conversation. I'm not saying like you don't even have to use Nostr Git or anything like that, but like for the conversation should be in a decentralized place where people don't get fully disenfranchised or fully cut off from the discussion, right? The other thing is, then there is Delve in Bitcoin, right? Like, it's another centralized solution. It's somebody's server. It's nice that the people who run it have the best intentions, and they do put the backup publicly, right? So like people can download the backup and whatever, but still, it's a centralized place. It's not great. And then we have the mailing list. The mailing list is, it's email. It's a bit more open. The moderation is a bit more lighter handed, so things get through. It's not perfect, but I think is much better than the GitHub discussion moderation. So I'm extremely disappointed, and I've like barely lost all my faith in the capacity of the current team using GitHub to moderate Bitcoin. Right? Like, mind you, Bitcoin doesn't depend on GitHub, right? Like, you run your own node, you can do whatever you want. But realistically speaking, that's where the software gets managed and maintained, is on GitHub. So it will be affected by it, wanting or not, right? So I think they should really look at themselves there. If they don't think they have the stomach to deal with, maybe they should find other people who do. If it's not for you, and I understand, like, most people don't want that fucking shit. Like, I don't want it.
Right, because I'm sure people would also say it's a thankless task.
Yeah,
and,
but it's the task you chose to be a volunteer for. So, eat the shit or like let somebody else do it. That is the truth there. I also think that we arrived at a point now where maybe there is too much philanthropy in Bitcoin. Maybe there's just too much money available for people to work on Bitcoin. And that makes it for more academic and less customer oriented. And I think we need to find a balance where it's more customer oriented. So maybe we go back to a place where there's more core devs being sponsored, maintained, maintained by industry other than philanthropy. So that's maybe another sort of like power shift. And listen, it's not like none of these issues are critical to Bitcoin to exist, right? Like, all these things are just blips. You don't have to update your Bitcoin node. You can be running version 14, still runs. If you want SegWit, run version 16.
Yeah. But to be fair, there are vulnerabilities and things that...
Yeah, but those vulnerabilities are all...
up, right?
No, but see, this is the thing. I don't subscribe to that because I have nodes that are very old running. No problem. So most of the vulnerabilities found later, they're not mission critical for anybody that doesn't care if their node gets taken down here and there, right? Like, if you're only concerned about your node crashing and you can just spin it up again, you don't care that much. A lot of these vulnerabilities are more concerned towards the lightning problems, which require a node to be
which
online.
requires liveness and online checking and watching the chain. And
This is, again, it's like payments hijacking the Bitcoin focus a bit more than it should, because technically there is no vulnerabilities that I know of that will make me too concerned with some versions back on Bitcoin. So there is a bit of that. There's a lot of nuance being lost, in that as well. And like, it's changes of guard come with a lot of mess, and I think, but I think the current team is at a risk of essentially completely disengaging with a lot of industry. I think essentially industry that is not fairly integrated with a lot of the philanthropy is not as well heard as the rest, which money talks, right? But nobody wants to like say out loud that money talks when it comes to philanthropy as well, right?
Yeah. I'm curious your take on this idea, because when you talk to some Bitcoin Core developers and people in that ecosystem, they might say, actually, there's not enough core developers. They might say, actually, think about the size of the ecosystem and the relatively small number of Bitcoin Core full-time developers, which might be, I don't know, under 100, maybe under 50.
Well, listen, any team in the history of all teams will always say we're underfunded and understaffed, right? I mean, maybe if the priorities were a bit different, they wouldn't feel so overstretched, right? Like, there's a lot of things that, like, academically speaking, they are mission critical, but practically speaking, aren't. That's what I keep on saying. Like, if you want to run your business with Bitcoin being version 14 or 16, you still can, no problem, right? Are you going to miss some features? Are you going to have some issues? Absolutely. But, you can also patch software yourself. A lot of miners patch the software themselves. They're not running stock core. So, it's a matter of like priority and like taking everything with a grain of salt. I think just taking everything with a grain of salt, like when people complain about things, is a big deal. Listen, if you think you're like, core doesn't follow priorities that you care or doesn't pay enough or whatever, I mean, go work somewhere else. Like, it's nobody has a God-given right to work on core. And it's like, when I say that, like, it's not out of a place where it's like, I'm extremely grateful for the people who do the work, who do the moderation, who do all this. But I think we have to be very careful with deifying people. We have to be very careful with ascribing more value than we should to some things, to some features, ascribing more risk than there is to some things. Because whenever you ask an engineer, yeah, the airplane is going to fall. It's not perfect, right? Like, but that's not true, right? Like, it still flies, right? Like, in software will never be perfect. So I think it's very important to sort of like have a more cool-headed approach to assessing risk, assessing priorities on Bitcoin Core, and I think it's in a great place. It's working great. Everybody is making money. You can send transactions without permission. The world's not gonna end. And people just need to remember that. And I think when you have people who are more consumer-oriented than academic-oriented, they often are a little bit more realistic about risk and priorities.
Yeah. Okay. So do you have a specific comment about the specific op return issue, which is sort of opening up the limits on op return as opposed to keeping it more locked down? Do you have a take on that specific issue, or you're kind of?
I mean, like, op return limitations came, Jesus, way back then. I can't remember the date anymore. Maybe 2014 or maybe before that.
Yeah, I think that was the original op return was.
Yeah, so like, it was born out of the fact that like people didn't want CP on it, like bad evil images on it. It was a risk. Bitcoin was very small, so you had to be careful with like what was on it in case there was the say black flag operation on it or something. Um, so so that was changed, and then we had a new set of dynamics, right? Because nothing in Bitcoin is a very simple change. Whenever you change something, a bunch of other things no longer work in the same way, economically speaking, right? So that's what we have now. I don't like I don't have I can see both sides of the conversation on this one. I don't personally have a strong opinion either way, but I respect the fact that both sides should be able to express their opinions on the GitHub PR, as unsavory and as annoying as noisy as it comes. Listen, if people are there just calling people's names, fuck it. Like, mute the comment. Like, but don't block people out of it. Listen, if they are there calling people's names, we know. Like, listen, if they're calling people's names and also providing some technical substance, maybe you let it fly, right? Because remember, the goal here is not to not be offended. The goal here is to get to a consensus truth, right? So in order to get to a consensus truth, you might need to hear technical
Unsavory
messaging,
things.
in a way that is impolite, and I'm okay with that. Now, if people are just there saying like "fuck you" and that's their only comment, then fuck you back and sort of like mute them.
Yeah, gotcha. One other thing, because things are changing over time, right? It's not that Bitcoin exists in a vacuum. I think one example, I'm curious to get your reaction on this as well. One example that might have arguably changed some of this stuff is BitVM, because arguably this kind of BitVM challenger verifier kind of proving model has enabled a bunch of either L2s or real L2s to think of Bitcoin as being this data availability layer, right? Because what has it motivated? It's motivated them to think about trying to, anchor things into the chain. And the kind of debate is sort of, should they just be pushed to put it into the UTXO set and therefore spam or pollute the UTXO set, or should they be allowed to, let's say, put more into the op return because maybe it's kind of seen like a harm minimization thing. So I guess I'm curious your reaction. Do you agree or disagree that it's because some of these things have changed around Bitcoin, things like BitVM and the associated L2s that want to use something BitVM or BitVM style because of their sequencer or something like that?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, like, honestly, like, most of the BitVM stuff is like completely like Rupert Goldberg machines. It's like, in my opinion, like too complicated, very difficult to do. I hope somebody manages to make it work like in a way that doesn't break things, but like, or that makes people lose money. But you know, honestly, like, I am now less interested in all this sort of complicated shit. Personally, uh, like, please by all means investigate, but like, we don't need to change like our priorities or Bitcoin in order to make these things work. We shouldn't. We should actually give less priority to these things. Go work on cross input signature aggregation. Go work on things that are a little bit more pressing. Go work on more privacy with the tools we have.
Yeah. Okay. And here's the other point I want to ask you, because culturally I'm with you, right? I'd rather just, I would rather just, not have these people, spam the UTXO set. But hypothetically, let's say the op return limit is not, raised or taken away, and they were to start just spamming the UTXO set. At that point,
There is
are
no
you okay
such
with
thing
that?
as
Or
spam, in my opinion. Is it
yeah.
paid? It's paid. There is no spam.
Okay, so what about the term pollute? Would you be okay with the term polluting the UTXO set,
I mean,
creating,
honestly, I
yeah.
think the term I like is like, I don't give a shit.
So you don't care if it makes the UTXO set just continue to blow out.
Are they paying? I think people should be good citizens of the commons, but like I don't think we should care. I mean, I don't care. Like, I don't even want to engage in the discussion because it's pointless. Like, it really is. Like, people can already make some of these changes on their nodes, and like, it is a fight for the defaults, and the fight for the defaults is always going to be the fight for the defaults. I think everybody on all sides is just wasting their time. I think most things get priced out, and if they don't get priced out, then let them feed the miners.
Okay. Yeah, and then I guess the other question people would be interested to know is your thoughts on Core as contrasted with other implementations, whether that's NOT or BTCD or LibBitcoin or whatever else. Do you see this current debacle as it might encourage the use of alternative implementations other than Bitcoin Core?
I don't see a problem with I think it's great that like people try to implement other things. I just tweeted actually about OpenSats maybe taking applications for Bitcoin knots. I think people shouldn't be afraid of competition. But it's tricky, right? Like Bitcoin Core has a monopoly on Bitcoin, right? Like 99% of the nodes are Bitcoin Core nodes. It's impossible to know for sure, of course, because people can just flag whatever they want. But that's the reality, right? I think it's good for people to experiment, for people to try to create new things, for people to fork core and try to maintain it in different ways. I think core needs to feel a little bit of competition sometimes for the management might be the wrong word, but for the lack of a word, for the management of the conversation, like it would be great if somebody just forked core on GitHub and took like enough people with them that are interested to have the discussion in a different sort of like set of tolerance on the discussion language, for example, right? Like maybe that's enough, but I wanna see more competition on that. I feel like people get too comfortable with their positions. They get too comfortable with power, and power corrupts, and it's not great. And I think so far the best maintainer that Bitcoin ever had was Orion. Like he always went above and beyond to make sure to not look like a censor, to try to be neutral and perceived neutral, which is more important than even being neutral, so that the discourse is not about censorship. The discourse is about the technical merits of things. I think like that is the crux of all this, is like, how can you keep things in a perception level where everybody feel like it is a fair technical discussion, is not a censored technical discussion based on language quality.
Yeah. Yeah, I think these are fair criticisms around the way the comments were moderated. I think, it might be, there's a lot of back and forth, and it is quite a niche kind of technical issue that requires a decent level of understanding. And I think, I think we're sort of seeing a lot of people just kind of spouting off. But I don't know. I guess, do you have any thoughts on where this resolves, or is it just kind of it'll blow over and just it won't matter that much in the long run?
I don't think it'll matter too much in the long run. It's all these things are kind of irrelevant. Like it really is irrelevant. Like it's like people are burning their reputations, people are burning their patience, people are burning their capital, people are burning their energy in irrelevant shit. It really is. Like it's but it is what it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess any final comments on, I guess from the OpenSats side, as you mentioned, you touched on this earlier that you were looking to potentially fund other developers.
Yeah,
Any
try
comment there on
stuff,
the
man.
OpenSats
Try
side?
stuff and apply. As long as it has like reasonable technical merit, it's something useful. There is value to the commons. I think you have a fair shake at being funded.
Great. Okay. Well, look, I think that's a good spot to wrap up there. So listeners, check out coinguide.com, and of course, OpenSats. Is it opensats.org, right? I'll just check the website. Opensats.org, yeah? Yeah. And so, great to chat, NVK, and yeah, I'll see you around soon.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.